All right, good morning. This is Chad Everett Broshears. I am the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia, and today I'm going to do an episode on uh, how I got my PhD in twerking. I wrote an article about this yesterday and I posted it out, and I decided to do a quick video on it just to do it a little bit more justice. So, and this applies to everything. I just picked, back in my youth, people used to say, "Yeah, well, you could always get a PhD in underwater basket weaving," and it's just as useless as getting one in twerking. Well, with specific elements that actually can be validatable more so now in twerking than say underwater basket weaving. But so I'll elaborate very quickly because this is also another what I've got a very short time frame to play with. So you have people with the idea of entitlement. All right. So that's one aspect that people do have. And those people are typically not responsible for much. And they usually blame a lot of people for things. So this is not a particular. The only way to identify these people is by that particular trait, not by any other factor. So it's not a race thing. It has nothing to do with a sex or any sort of gender or gender orientation thing. Or even sexual orientation thing. It's completely within the mindset, and that's a lot of the youth. I actually was part of the generation that was just starting to get accustomed to that idea, ushered in by HRS and other factors, as well as, uh, other variables where parents were like basically raising us to believe that we were special amongst our peers. That's not true. But anyway. Yeah, sure. There's attributes that we've developed that actually make us different than our peers, but it doesn't make us really special by discounting other people's abilities. So yeah, that's a false narrative. Okay, so to get to the PhD in twerking. All right, so what we have is we have a lot of people that are trying to make it, and there's an idea that there's a particular type of relationship that they should have in order to make it. It's and we've had this. This is not something new to the human species at all, as far as looking for a particular mate. But it's just gotten to the point now where there's so many crucial elements that's necessary for a good, healthy relationship. As far as like-mindedness, desires for a future, self-education, cooperative education, exploratory education. There's so many different factors and facets of our exposure and experiences that we've actually step over very quickly or minorly address certain areas because somebody has a certain look that we idolize, or that they have a particular trait that we idolize, or a particular resource that we've idolized or been conditioned to idolize. So we have a lot of different factors that actually play into this, but we'll do it very quickly. Now, the idea that, so what happens is everybody functions to their priorities, no matter what it is. Just because you know by your life experiences what it takes to accomplish a specific goal does not mean the other person knows the exact same thing, regardless if you put it into the context of common sense or not. That does not make a difference, as I watch my video on common sense to understand more where I'm coming from with that. People do not function under the same context. Now, we all have the world as its means of a reality. Then we have individual realities, which is how we believe we need to navigate and understand our reality, and then therefore how to live into our reality or our life. Now, whenever you sit back and say, your priorities are all wrong, well, you don't know exactly what they're focusing on or why they're focusing on that. Yes, it may be a truth that if they really wanted to be more wealthy or stable in a job or whatever, then they would put that focus as a high priority, priority 1 or priority 2 or priority 3 or whatever. But they would not have actions like needing to go out to the club being more desirable and a higher priority than going to bed on time, so that they have a clear mind, well-rested body, and a functional capacity to deal with the way the world's going to behave, so that they can continue to navigate through with the priority of growing their business. So you see how the priority value on that, if you look at from your perspective, you say you're doing it wrong. From their perspective, they may believe that in order to have a successful life is to have a successful wife or whatever, like find the best person, the best partner or whatever. In a partnership, yes, most people will function like that. So if they're focusing on twerking more than they're focusing on business development and an entrepreneur direction, I'm not that big of a fan in the corporate direction of business development, but entrepreneurially, I find it's much more largely faceted and much more functional for a human being to behave in, that creates more satisfaction for self. But that's also another conversation piece to actually identify what satisfaction for self is or how to acquire it. So with that being said, moving forward very quickly, now, as far as the if you see as a there's a lot of memes going on in the pop culture. There's a statement, I'm looking for my ride or die bitch or my ride or die woman or whatever. Predominantly, it's ride or die bitch. It's basically meaning, the two of them would go through anything together, including if they had to Bonnie and Clyde it or whatever, go over the cliff together, or, kill themselves together if needed, or go through anything, no matter what, they've got each other's back. Now, that's a great fantasy. And a lot of people want that, maybe not in the same verbiage, but a lot of people want a partner that has their back and it really truly has their interests in mind. Always. So with that being said, a lot of people miss steps. They don't understand the developmental values of their partners. They don't understand the developmental values of their partners, so they continue to step over it because maybe Jay-Z was very attractive to them, and or Beyonce or whatever, and they only know that person's social impression or character that is brought to them by way of entertainment through the media, or pretty much through the media, through entertainment sources. This is where I covered the very brief statement about knowing your authors. So for me, in my personal experience, I'm a reader. I don't watch much television. I've got my own personal library. That's my thing. I absolutely love reading. I love learning. I'm constantly watching educational videos and things like that, not just documentaries, but just informative educational value things. But that's also because my desired future is hinging upon it, but also at the same time, I really enjoy it. So it works out in my favor. Now, aside from that, if you so for me, there was one individual in particular, and I wrote about this in the article, that I was really enamored with. This guy was awesome. He's just he wrote, and I was just he got me. He totally got me. And I'm like, oh man, this guy, he's got his head on his shoulders. He's square up there. He's just perfect in my mind as far as the way that he sees the world, or he was a model for perfection for me and my business. Because he's a holistic practitioner and all of this. And at the time, I was predominantly just, going towards the personal training company that I own. And I was really all about learning as much as I could, because this guy seemed to speak what I was thinking. And then he was bringing me to new conclusions that I would have gotten to had I had those books available to me that he was reading. And, I just felt like there was a lot of camaraderie between the two of us. So I would listen to him and just think about, basically fabricate the way the conversation would go between us if him and I had that conversation. Or if I were listening to something else that I disagreed with, what would this guy think and how would we have a conversation around it? We do this. And most of the time, people don't do it on the forefront of the consciousness. They do it in the backside of the consciousness, not necessarily in the subconscious, but in the backside of their consciousness, not direct focus for a lot of people. So I spent this time just absolutely thinking about the way this man would behave in a conversation with me. Finally, the opportunity came up. Now, this individual charges $500 an hour with a 6 to 8 month time waiting list and a $10,000 retainer just to see him to be a client, with a homework value of, I believe there's 3 full books that you have to actually read them and then do all of the homework associated with the book that's assigned through the book. So he's no joke, right? So I was all kinds of excited, and the ex-girlfriend and I went down to Miami to see this gentleman. When we got there, you know, we talked about all kinds of stuff and the excitement about it, like meeting with him, because she also like was following him. And we went through his course. It was an 8-hour course, but it ended up being like 9.5, 10 hours, because the man loved to talk and we loved to listen and learn and explore conversation as far as this class, right? This large group. It was at a convention. And at the end, after I introduced myself in the beginning, but he didn't have time to speak. The class, or the course, was just beginning, so I quickly took my seat and listened throughout the thing. Barely moved or anything. I just was trying to take in as much information as possible. And I finally got a chance to meet this gentleman at the end. And whenever I walked up with Jessica, I said, "Hi, great course, and good job, and all of this." And he basically replied, "Thank you," and then proceeded to talk to Jessica as if I weren't standing there or part of it. He did pose for a picture with me, but that's about the extent of the exchange. And I realized that all of those things that I fabricated were first and foremost fabrications, and I was basing it off of all of the voids that were left, that were not answered between his character and mine. So I didn't know him, and I basically, every area that I didn't know about him, I, involuntarily, because I liked him, and this is more of a subconscious piecemeal value, I subconsciously placed in all of the values that he was, everything that I would wanted him to be in this conversation. A supporter of mine, everything that you can imagine with that. So I fabricated this gentleman's existence, right? All based off of what he put out in his literature and his videos. But ultimately, it wasn't really what I got to experience, because it wasn't him, right? It was his character. Now, he's very congruent with his character to a great extent, but there were still plenty of things I didn't know about him that I filled in the voids on. So that's what we do. We find our idols or mentors or whatever. Predominantly, the mentors mentioned would be more idolized than just true mentors. And Jessica noticed it as well, by the way, as far as that goes. She goes, "He didn't really talk to you much," and I thought that you guys were gonna have some great conversation, because she has told me that she believes that I'm one of the smartest people she's ever known, and I felt that conversation, like he was gonna get me. Right, and that we were going to have this awesome conversation. It was just going to be like, earth-shattering for everybody who would listen, right? We all like to think we're above average too, and I happen to know that I'm about average, not above it, but it doesn't mean that I've never had lapses in thinking the opposite. Well, regardless, all of this, people do this. Like, say, using the example of Jay-Z or Beyonce, whichever you orientate towards, regardless of your gender, you may want certain characteristics of people you see on television or listen to on the radio or see in programs or have books that are out or whatever, and you will fabricate the differences between them. Now, I say that all of that because it does go back to the PhD in twerking, because if your focus is on being the best dancer to get the ideal mate, but your dancing skills are only to get your mate, and you step over all the values that are necessary to have a fulfilled relationship, then you end up with the mate that it doesn't work out all that well. You may go through an unbelievable suffering, self-imposed suffering, to try to keep this person happy, but ultimately you can't really use your skill set in an economy based on money. You can use it in an economy based on relationships and emotions, but not off of money. Economical niches aren't always aren't always money related. There's a lot of values to the economical models whenever you really explore what economies are, not just the economy, but economies, meaning multiple different areas and how we get along inside of that and survive in it. But so with that, we have this gentleman, or these people that we idolize, and ultimately we end up not we fabricate a lot of stuff. We focus on certain things, we develop ourselves in certain ways, and then we end up with getting a PhD in something that really doesn't have much economical value, especially for making a living. So with that, guys, read the article. Again, this is Chad Everett Brochures. I am the creator of Human Manual and the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. If you like this video, please share it, leave comments below, and I'll talk to you later. Enjoy.